I'm sorry. I thought we were in debate already. I didn't realize that was the test debate.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to open with, I think, so currently my view is that human decisions have two possible causes, which are either prior events and randomness, and that if it is true that human decisions are caused by one of those two, then they are not a product of free will, and therefore free will doesn't exist.
That's how you define free will?
Yeah, if free will exists, if given complete knowledge of everything that exists right now and the outcome of all random events in the future, we could not predict what people would do. Because if we could predict what they would do, then they wouldn't have free will, because they wouldn't be able to choose.
Okay, so okay, hang on a second. I must have misunderstood you. You're saying there is no free will, but there is some degree of free will, right? Or
no, I'm saying there is no free will.
Like hard determinism, then.
Yeah, I don't call myself a hard determinist because I'm not very knowledgeable on that, and I think it has like something to do with like thinking everything is predetermined, whereas like quantum physics kind of breaks that down. But I do believe that like humans have no control over their decisions as like individuals.
So like there's a 0 degree of free will, right? Like,
yeah.
None at all. Okay, so
yeah.
do you believe in morality?
Yes.
You believe, okay, so are humans capable or incapable of engaging in moral actions? Moral or immoral?
I believe that morality exists. I don't believe that moral responsibility exists.
Okay, so what's morality then, I guess, in your concept?
Morality is, well, different people define it in different ways, but generally it's the sense that like we should do what makes people happier. But then moral responsibility comes in. It's like that's what we should do. That would be the optimal thing to do, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're responsible for not doing that.
Okay, so there's no such thing as being immoral, right?
Well, you can act immorally, but it's not your fault.
So you're
right?
you're defining morality as that which increases human happiness, right?
Generally. I mean, like, there are a lot of theories, but yeah.
But humans have no moral obligations whatsoever, right? Like, it's perfectly fine for humans to, let's say, decrease happiness.
I don't know if, like, I don't know if I would say it's fine, because that's kind of vague, but I would say that they aren't responsible for the actions that they commit.
So
they can do... I don't really want to say it's okay, because it is an immoral action, but it's not their fault for doing it. So like I wouldn't say, absent any benefits, I wouldn't say like punish someone for doing something wrong.
Why do you describe it as an immoral action if there's no moral obligation on the part of anyone, it seems? Doesn't seem like anyone has any moral obligation to do anything.
Well, no one has any moral obligation, but that doesn't mean that morality doesn't exist. So I'm saying like morality is a set of actions that if we followed them would make humans happier, and people can act morally or immorally, but that doesn't, they don't have responsibility for those actions.
Okay, why should morality be whatever makes humans happy? Like, why should anyone care about that?
Well, that's, like I said at the start, that's not like a definite thing. I'm not asserting any particular framework of morality, but I'm saying like maybe you think we should base on rights, like morality is whatever preserves human liberty or whatever. But the fundamental idea is that whatever moral framework you create, the people who are acting in the world are not responsible for their actions under that framework. So I don't think that's particularly relevant in this case.
Well, because when most people think about morality, they're thinking about moral obligation. Like, what should I do in any given scenario? Like, should we rape children, and why not? You know,
yeah.
That's what people mean when they're thinking about morality. But you're kind of defining it in a way that is sort of independent of humans. But it doesn't really make that much sense to me, because why would humans be special in the first place? If we first of all, we have no control whatsoever, so who gives a shit?
Well, that's another debatable thing. Like you could say objective morality doesn't exist. I'm not going to argue for or against that here. You could also say that humans aren't special. Like, I'm also not going to argue for or against that, because what I'm saying is I don't think there are moral obligations, because I think that the word obligation carries some prerequisite of moral responsibility, right? Like if you have an obligation, then it implies that you have a responsibility to fulfill that obligation, and if you fail, then it's your fault. So I would say there are things that people should do in the sense that they would comport with some moral framework, but that doesn't mean they have an obligation to do it in the sense that they're morally responsible for what they do.
It kind of does, though, because if you're saying someone should do, you are saying they're morally obligated. Like, for example, I would say that you shouldn't kill your neighbor. Like in general, you probably shouldn't kill your neighbor. So I am saying that you have a moral obligation not to do that. And you're kind of suggesting that too. What you're describing as morality actually isn't morality. It doesn't. It seems like, oh well, I'd prefer that their humans be happier, but it doesn't seem like morality in the sense that how we normally think about it. Like, what should I do in this situation? And if I don't do this thing, that's bad, and if I do this thing, it's good. You know what I mean? Or
Yeah, I guess it's possible that we disagree in our definitions of morality, and possibly under your definition of morality, I would say that morality doesn't exist. But what I mean when I say we should do something isn't that we have an obligation. It's kind of the equivalent of like, it would be nice if we did this. So if I say you shouldn't kill your neighbor, it would be nice if you didn't kill your neighbor because your neighbor likes being alive. So killing him would make him unhappy, and it wouldn't really benefit you that much. So therefore, it would be an immoral action. That doesn't mean you are morally responsible for not killing your neighbor in the context of free will.
so, what should we do about like murderers and rapists and stuff then?
Well, there's one possibility is throwing them in jail has a deterrent effect. That's one of the reasons that we have the criminal justice system. But if you,
I asked why we should do something, and as a hard determinist, your response should always be that we're just gonna do whatever we do, and there are no shoulds in a hard determinist world. There's no such thing as should. There's only is.
well, like I said, I think our definitions of should are different. So, like I said, when I say should, I don't mean like what we are morally obligated to do. I mean what it would.
Is there are there oughts? Like that's what.
There are oughts in the sense that there are morally correct actions or moral actions, but there aren't oughts in the sense of moral responsibility. So in the case of like what should we do with the rapist? If it would benefit society to, for example, lock him up so he doesn't go rape more people, then I would say that's good. If it's not going to benefit anyone at all, if it's not going to have any benefits to like torture him, for example, then I would say we shouldn't do that. If there were no benefits to putting him in jail, I would say we shouldn't do that either, because he's not morally responsible for that.
I guess where I'm getting caught up is trying to identify how you get to should in the first place. Like, how do you go from everything is exactly as it should be, it couldn't be any other way? How do you go from is to ought? Like, for me, it seems like you're basically just making something up there. Like, oh, we should do this, but there's no real explanation for why we should do that. If it's the case that we're just going to do whatever we're going to do.
Mm-hmm. I think that same problem exists whether or not free will exists. So I don't know if you have like a specific reason why you think like moral responsibility is imperative to morality existing in the first place. But I would say like anytime we propose a moral framework, someone's going to say like, oh, you just made that up. Like, why should humans be valuable? Why should animals be valuable? Why don't we value trees in our moral framework? Like, so that kind of thing is.
Yeah. When I use the word ought, I'm implying free will. I'm absolutely implying free will. I'm implying that you have a choice in the matter and that you ought to, like, for example, not rape children, right? I'm saying you ought not to do that So I am implying that you have a choice and that you can choose, you can use your free will to choose not to do that. I'm absolutely implying free will. But what you're saying is that there can't be any oughts or shoulds. You really couldn't say anything to them. You couldn't say you should or shouldn't do it. Like from a hard determinist perspective, you just say, oh well, he's just going to do whatever he's going to do. You know, there's you can't say what he should do.
Well, like for example, not just hypothetically, let's say that someone had a button in front of them, and if they pressed it, it would send like a giant asteroid towards Earth, and it would just completely destroy Earth and everyone on it. Mm-hmm. If I say you shouldn't press the button, I don't think I'm using should in the same way that you're using it. When I say should, I don't mean like you have free will to choose whether or not you press the button, and therefore you should make the choice of not pressing it. I'm saying that because it would, under my moral framework, be a moral action to not press the button, that is something that would be good if you didn't press that button, not necessarily that you have control over it. Okay. So I think we're using should in different ways.
So you're conceiving of humans more like comets, right? So like let's say a comet were about to hit the Earth. Would you say to the comet, you shouldn't hit the Earth? Or like a tsunami, you shouldn't hit Thailand, you should hit somewhere else that's less populated or something. Is that how you're saying it? Or
I guess. I mean, like people usually assume that humans have more control over their actions, and one of the reasons that we can say like you should do something is because you're never going to change a tsunami's mind, but you can change a human's mind. So while you might say like, oh, my action in order to change someone's mind was predetermined, it would still be a good thing if I could, for example, convince Kim Jong-un to stop like completely destroying everyone in his country. So even though he doesn't have the free will to choose that, I can still explain to him my moral framework. And if he understands that, then he can change his mind as well.
But wait, wasn't that all destined to happen anyways, right? Like that was just gonna, you know, whatever you were going to do was going to affect him in some way, and he was just going to do that anyways. But ultimately, it doesn't really matter what he does because he's just going to do whatever he does.
Well, ultimately, it does matter what he does, depending on like what moral framework you're under. Again, like if for example, you're saying what is moral is what makes humans happy, then mm-hmm. him deciding to not be a dictator would make more people happy, so it'd be moral. And I'm going to go back to the analogy of the tsunami. So again, you can't change a tsunami's mind. I'm never going to go up to a tsunami and say, hey, you shouldn't hit Thailand. And it's going to be like, oh, okay, just switch its direction. But I can do that to Kim Jong-un if I can get him to sit down and actually discuss with me. Like maybe not Kim Jong-un, but you know, some people.
Do that if you were destined to do that, right? Like you can only do that if that was going to happen anyways. That's the only scenario in which you can do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so then it doesn't make sense to say that you should try to influence him in that way because there is no should. You either will or will not do that, and it will result in him doing or not doing, destroying the Earth, right? So even then there's still no shoulds.
Well, I think this goes back to the problem we had earlier with using the word should differently. So again, if I can change Kim Jong-un's mind and that would improve people's lives, then it would be morally correct for me to do that because it would make people happier. So if I was predetermined to do that, then that's fine, but it still falls under a moral framework that I've set up.
Yeah, I guess so, but you're saying that you should do something that you absolutely have no choice to do, so it makes about the same amount of sense as saying the tsunami should go somewhere else, right? Because this can only happen in one scenario, and that is if it was absolutely predetermined to happen. That's the only way that it can happen. So it would be like the same thing like saying the tsunami should do something. Well, they're going to either do something else or not do something else, just like you, right? But they're functionally equivalent. If neither one is making any choices or decisions here, then you're functionally equivalent to a tsunami in that sense.
Okay, so I agree with you that under my framework, both the tsunami and the human are predestined to do whatever they want to do, but I'm going to disagree that makes them functionally equivalent. because I think the difference is that humans have the capacity to investigate moral frameworks, which tsunamis do not. Like right now, we're arguing about morality. If I'm going to do a debate.
What does that mean to investigate a moral framework? I'm confused. What does that mean?
I mean, like we have the ability to argue about what we should do, and then once we have that debate and we can come to a consensus, then we can say, oh, I should act in this specific way. It would be good if I acted in this specific way. So even though that's predetermined, it's still good to talk about moral frameworks because we have the ability to learn about them, whether that was predetermined or not.
What does that give us? The ability to talk about what's moral? Like what? That's all predetermined too. So like what do we gain out of that? I don't understand.
Well, I don't think whether or not it's predetermined really matters in this case, because whether it's predetermined or not, we're going to talk about morality. And then the idea is that ultimately we're going to get to a better version of morality. For example, if you and I were debating about whether slavery was a good thing, eventually the debate ends and we decide, okay, slavery is bad. Even though we were predetermined to decide that slavery was bad, we can use that knowledge that we have now to stop enslaving people. So that's good.
But that would have all been predetermined anyway. So, and you still have not got to any kind of ought or should, right? Like all you're describing is events as they happened.
Yes.
Right? You're not throughout all of this. You should still be on the idea that there's no free will in any case that either preceded it or is currently happening or any case in the future, right? You're saying that there's never has been a free will and there never will be a free will. Right. So in each and every scenario, you're saying there is no decision or choice being made here. So that sounds like a tsunami to me, because at no point does any part of the tsunami or the tsunami itself ever make any kind of decision that affects any kind of outcome. So they're equivalent to us in that way, in that they're not choosing to do anything either, right? Like it's like saying the atoms within a tsunami are all simultaneously making a decision, and then they go and wonder, no, they're not. It's all fake, right? So it doesn't matter what kind of fake choices and decisions we make. We're kind of like tsunamis too. You know, we're just going to do whatever we do.
Yeah, I agree that we're just going to do whatever we do, but I don't think we've addressed.
Should do something, right? I mean, because think about how this sounds like. You know, this atom should behave in a way that those atoms don't behave. Like, it doesn't make sense to say that. It's like, no, that's an atom. That's a hydrogen atom. This is what a hydrogen atom does. And that we should describe humans in exactly the same way as we do atoms, because they're not special, right? Without free will.
Yeah, but again, I think the difference is that we, as large collections of atoms that have brains, so we're able to think, we have the ability, like I said before, to look into this morality. So again, there are morally correct actions that we can take that my wall can't take, because my wall can't consider whether we should value rights or happiness. My wall's never going to do that. So it's not going to be able to make a moral action. Whereas
what if it's the case that, you know, that wall fell on some murderer who was going to kill you or something?
Well, that wall had no brain that was controlling its actions.
Brains don't matter. In the absence of free will, brains don't matter at all. Like, we might as well throw brains, you know, there's no difference between a wall and a brain if there's no free will. Like, who cares about brains?
Well, the difference, like I said, is that we are able to decide what we should do.
Wait, we make decisions? Are you saying
we are able to use our brains in order to control our bodies, whereas a wall is just like a wall. It's gonna actually, yeah, let me think about that for a second. So because I feel like I'm repeating myself, so I'm trying to figure out how we can change the way we're talking.
Because you're implying like a self with free will when you're saying, I'm deciding to control my body. Who's deciding? You are. What are you deciding? Right? There's no free will. So it's like, it seems like you're inventing a new character that propels this body forward. When you really, in the absence of free will, you should just be thinking about every human as being a zombie. Like we're just all zombies, just doing whatever we're doing, and nobody's deciding to do nothing. Just like the wall. The wall just fell down, right? The human just attacked the other human. You can't say the human should or shouldn't rape the kid or whatever. It's like saying the wall shouldn't fall down or it should fall down. It's like it's just it will or it won't according to physics.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to go back to the fact that you can convince people in a way that you can't convince walls. So do you have like, I don't know if I missed what you said, but do you have like a specific response to that? Like we can convince other people, but we can't convince a tsunami.
Convince them of what? You're implying that they had a choice between believing one thing or believing another thing. There was no choice at all.
Well, there was no choice, but
you didn't convince anyone.
I did convince them. I was predetermined to convince them, but I still convinced them.
Okay, so are you describing this thing like a chain reaction? Because that'd be like saying the rock the rock made the wall fall because the rock hit the wall and then it fell, right? And then they're saying, okay, well, the rock decided to kill the murderer because the rock hit the wall first.
Well, I don't think anyone decides things in the sense of.
You don't think anyone decides anything at all. If there's no free will, there's no decision.
Yeah, there's no decision, but that doesn't mean that we can't talk about what humans can do in order to increase the happiness of other people. So, like, it's
either will or we won't increase their happiness. There's no what should we do. We shouldn't do anything, or we neither should nor shouldn't do anything. We're just
there is what should we do because our actions influence the happiness of other people. And we are able to
we're not in control of our actions. So
we aren't in control of our actions, but by talking to people, we can change the way that they act.
But so we regardless of talk to people to change the way that they act.
What?
We can't choose to talk to people to change the way that they act.
Yeah, but it still makes sense to act as if morality exists, because if it does exist,
but we can't choose to act as if morality exists.
I know, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
I believe it does exist. I believe in morality. I believe in free will too.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's from my perspective. Yes, I am behaving in a way that is consistent with the belief that there is free will. I will say you should not burn down your neighbor's home, for example. I'll say that. I'm saying that I don't think you just either will or won't. I mean, yeah, technically you will or won't do that. But what I'm saying is that you specifically should not do that, and that you're making a choice. You have a choice, and you should choose not to do it, and that's different from what you're saying, right?
Yeah, I'm saying that you don't have a choice, but it would be better if you didn't burn down the neighbor's house.
Yeah, I don't know. That's just a different conception of morality, because when most people think about morality, they're thinking, okay, what should I do in this situation, like the trolley problem or something like that? And your answer to any question of morality there can't be a should, right? Because what you're saying is it is better. Okay, that's not saying you should do either one, right? You're just saying it would be better if this or that.
Yeah, so under your definition of should, if you are saying if we accept your definition of should and you're saying that morality is only what we should do, then under your framework I would say there is no morality.
Wait, only what we should and shouldn't do. There's things you shouldn't do.
Yeah. I think. But right, if we're using your definition of should and morality is only what we should and shouldn't do, then I would say there's no morality. Okay. I'm just defining morality differently than you are.
Okay, well that's consistent at least, right? That's what you would have to believe if you didn't believe in any kind of free will, if you didn't believe that you were capable of making choices and decisions that can affect some kind of outcome, which you kind of do because you're saying, oh, well, I could convince someone else to believe this and then change their mind. But all you're really describing in a universe without free will is a chain reaction. It's like a rock hitting a wall, which then crashes on a murderer. and you're trying to describe that in a way that kind of implies free will, but it should sound more like it should be more like a chain reaction. Like that's how you should be viewing every single action that happens. It's just something that happened. Like, oh, it's just atoms moving around, you know?
Yeah, well, the reason I use the word convince is just because it's faster in like English language. Like I could say my brain caused my mouth to move in a certain way that the other person's brain picked up certain responses, and that changed the way that they thought about their actions, and then they acted a different way later. But when I say convinced, I don't mean like I chose in the sense of free will to talk to them, and then they chose in the sense of free will to change their mind. So yes, it is a chain reaction. But I as like a body of atoms did something to them that caused them to change their mind, not in the sense of free will, but that I changed their mind. I changed the way that they thought.
Okay, so there's no shoulds or shouldn'ts, right, at all in your conception?
Not under your definition, no.
Okay, so you couldn't really say if you couldn't tell a pedophile you shouldn't rape a 3-year-old, right? You couldn't really say that because they're not, and it doesn't make sense to say someone should or shouldn't do something, right?
Not under your definition.
Okay. Is there a different definition in which you're saying that they should be allowed to, or they shouldn't be allowed to rape 3-year-olds?
Well, that's what I've been saying. You say like should implies a moral responsibility, and I say that should is just what would fall under a moral framework of like happiness or rights or whatever you define morality to be. So I would say you shouldn't rape a kid, and that the kid would not be happy after being raped, but that doesn't mean that they have moral responsibility.
Okay. Where does this morality come from? Right, like what is the source of this idea that you shouldn't like, or that you should care about human happiness in the first place? Like, why is that?
I don't know. Do you have an answer?
Yeah, I believe in morality and free will, and I believe in conscious being.
But what does free will have to do with whether happiness is important?
Well, because I believe conscious beings have free will, right? Like to me, consciousness is important because otherwise, consciousness wouldn't make sense at all in the absence of free will. There's just no reason at all why we should be conscious.
Why is consciousness impossible without free will?
Well, I can't figure out a reason why we would be. Like, what would be the point? It seems like a form of torture, maybe. Like, I don't know. What would be the point in making something conscious that couldn't like choose to do anything? I don't know.
Well, okay, this is I have a point with this, but do you believe in evolution?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I would say with like what's the point of consciousness? I don't think there's any specific point to consciousness when it was first created beyond that it might have had some evolutionary advantage. I don't understand how conscious.
If you look into the science on that, it doesn't seem to make sense. Like for everything that they've looked into, it seems to make you less fit. Like you're less fit by being consciousness adds nothing at all. Like even when it comes to calculating, like you'd be a much better calculator. You'd be a calculator, and consciousness doesn't help like in any way.
So wait, so what is that? Like I think you can have consciousness with or without free will. So what does this have to do with free will?
Well, I'm just saying that it doesn't seem like there would be a point to the whole thing, is all. You know, it's not like a logical impossibility or a physical impossibility. It seems like kind of pointless to me.
So you're saying, like, let me try and get this. So you're saying that the reason consciousness is useful is because it gives us free will?
Yeah, well, that among other reasons, yeah.
Okay, so you say among other reasons, and I would agree with you that there are other reasons that consciousness is beneficial, and those are what I would say is like the purpose of consciousness, I guess, like the evolutionary purpose that it provides us, in the sense of like maybe it's because following our conscience benefits us sometimes, like in a tribal setting. It makes people like us more if we follow our conscience, for example.
But killing benefits us too sometimes, you know, or stealing, or
yeah, which is why we also have an evolutionary urge, for example, to kill our stepchildren. But I don't think that has anything to do with like free will, like consciousness.
Should people resist that, or what should they do? If you want to kill yourself, good.
It would. I feel like we're going to backtrack to where we were before, but it would be good if they didn't follow those urges.
Okay, yeah, I don't know, because it is the case that if there's no free will, there really can't be morality in the tradition, unless you're talking about the kind of morality that you're suggesting, which basically comes out of thin air. You know, you're just making it up, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you're not saying that anyone has any kind of moral obligation to do or not do anything, right? Like,
there's no moral responsibility.
Yeah, so you couldn't even tell someone like you should not stab that person in the eye. You couldn't even say that.
Okay, we went back to the definition of should. So I can't tell someone you have a moral responsibility not to stab them in the eye because there aren't any moral responsibilities. But I can say it would be bad if you stabbed them in the eye. Again, that doesn't mean they have a responsibility not to.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the way that you're describing morality is like, it's like me saying, you know, it would be bad if the comet hit the Earth, right? But you would never, like, it seems like you're still kind of implying morality. You're just not going to say the words. Like, if a comet hit the Earth, I wouldn't say, you know, I wouldn't say that it shouldn't hit the Earth, you know, or the tsunami should or should go in a different direction. I would just be like, okay, it's exactly as you say. It would be better if it didn't kill a bunch of people. And so the way that you're describing it, the way I just described the tsunami, that's how you should be thinking about humans. In the same way, like it would be better if you didn't do that, but you shouldn't think of them as moral agents that are capable of making decisions at all. Like at all. You shouldn't hate anyone for sure, right? You don't hate anyone.
Definitely not hate anyone.
Yeah, like it doesn't make sense that you couldn't hate anyone at all if you realize that they're just not responsible for nothing.
Right.
Like Trump or anyone.
just quickly to respond to the comment, I'm just gonna reiterate what I said before. So basically, because our brains can control our bodies, not in the free will sense, but in the sense of like electrical impulses being sent to the rest of our body to make it move and stuff. And because we have the capability of being convinced, even if we're predetermined to be convinced, then developing a moral framework is useful because we can give that moral framework to other people and then they can be convinced and then they'll act in a certain way that's better.
Yeah, I know, but you're still describing a chain reaction. You know, it'd be like we should, or the rock should hit the wall, and it's like, no, it either is or it isn't gonna hit the wall. It's a rock. It doesn't make choices and decisions.
I think that not just the rock has hit a wall. We've also hit a wall here. So, is there anything else you want to talk about for the last 11 minutes here?
I don't think we can get past this because, if you don't believe in morality in the traditional sense, then, I guess it makes sense that you could believe there's no free will. I believe free will is absolutely necessary for there to be morality, because if you can't make any choice or decision, then there can't be morality, right? You can't say that one should or shouldn't do anything in any case, because they either will do or not do that thing. And that's that. There's no, there are no shoulds and there's no oughts. There's only is in the case of hard determinism. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Okay, so let's say, for the sake of argument, let's say that under free will there is no morality, right? Like there's no morality. It's all like predetermined. Nothing matters. Does that disprove free will?
If there's no more,
does that disprove determinism? Is what I meant to say. Does that disprove determinism?
Well, no, I just happen to believe in morality, so I think we do make choices and decisions that can affect outcomes. But, I acknowledge the limitations of my view. I know I can't prove that, just like you can't prove your view. It's just not – all I know is this. If you do believe in hard determinism, you can't really believe in morality. Not in the normal sense. You can't believe in assigning like moral agency to, you can't believe that humans are special in any way. Like humans have to be functionally equivalent to tsunamis and comments in the absence of free will, because otherwise it just doesn't make sense.
Right. So what I'm going to say is like, I agree that we both have beliefs on the topic of morality, but I think that free will is a much more debatable, and I don't think this is a word, but decidable issue. Like, we can actually come to the truth on free will. And right, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we'll never know.
Well, how can we come to the truth? I'm just curious why you believe that. Do you think like neuroscience, is that what you think, or?
No, it was kind of the argument I made at the start. But before I get into that, I want to say, like, if we can decide with reasonable certainty that we don't have free will, then we shouldn't reject that just because like one person believes that there's morality, because we don't have evidence for morality. But if morality corresponds to free will, and we know that there's probably not free will, then that means maybe we do have to throw out morality in favor of something that's supported by logic and evidence.
Well, you do have experience of free will. Whether or not that's real, it's hard to say, but everyone has that first person experience of free will. Everyone.
Well, so everyone.
It seems like you have a burden to overcome here, because everyone has the perception of free will.
Yeah, so I'll get into my arguments here, but people perceive that they have free will, but some people also perceive, for example, that they can like feel God's presence. But just because they perceive that doesn't mean it's true. Maybe there's an evolutionary advantage to humans, for example, to think we have free will, or maybe we just like by default don't really understand the issue. But again, even if something intuitively feels right, that doesn't mean it is right. Like, most people would say every particle has a definite position, but once you get into quantum mechanics, you realize maybe that's not the case the way you thought about it before. But that doesn't make it wrong just because most people wouldn't think of it that way. So my argument for determinism is the same as what I said at the start, which is actions are either caused by prior events external to the human will or randomness. So if prior events and randomness are what cause decisions, then there's no room for free will in there. And I believe that an uncaused, non-random event is impossible, and therefore there can't be free will. Because
right. I mean, all the examples you gave, I could always say, or free will does exist. Like you're saying, oh, well, that doesn't mean that free will exists, and I'm like, well, it doesn't mean it doesn't either.
Well, it's like I said, if you're going to hold free will, you have to believe that there's something that exists in humans that's both not caused and not random. But if that's true, then how does anyone make a decision, right? Like, let's say it
could be unknown cause, right? And it could be random in the sense that this is an emergent property, but that it's now something that exists in the universe.
Would you agree that if something's random in like the roll of a dice sense of the word random, then it wouldn't be free will?
Well, that's not how I was meaning random. I mean random in that like this all could have arisen through the forces of the universe, right? This is an emergent property that came out of the Big Bang, right?
Yeah, I mean random in like the coin flip dice roll sense of like nothing's controlling it. It's just like 50% chance of happening or not happening. But I think, like, let's say you're trying to decide whether or not you should kill your neighbor. Mm-hmm. And it's like some people would say free will means you can choose to take moral responsibility. Yeah. But some people will choose to kill their neighbor and some people won't. What factors cause them to do that? It has to be non-random and non-caused. But I don't think that's possible, because how would they possibly...
an unknown cause doesn't imply no cause. Like, just because you don't know the cause doesn't mean it's unknown. I mean, just because you don't know it doesn't.
But if there's a prior cause, like even if we don't know it, if it was caused by a prior event, then it wasn't in that person's control, so it wasn't free. There's no free will if it was caused.
But no. Like if someone decides, that's the cause of the change in the action, right? That's what you're talking about, or?
Yeah, I mean the causes of their decision. So like their decision is a cause of their action, but what's the cause of their decision? And I would say that's completely prior events and randomness.
Right, but what if there's some third thing that is free will?
I would say, like I've been saying, I would say that's impossible because there can't possibly be something that's uncaused and non-random. And even if it is possible, it's highly unlikely because nothing like that has ever existed.
Right, but there's no planet like Earth either, right? We've been searching forever, and nothing is like Earth. Like every new Earth-like planet turns out not to be an Earth-like planet at all. So maybe we are special. Have you ever thought of it that way?
Well, I think conscious beings are special because they're conscious, but I don't think that exempts them from like basic laws of logic. And what I'm proposing here is we can't have an uncaused and non-random thing because that's just not how it works.
Well, maybe like consciousness causes the collapse. What about that? Maybe it's consciousness that causes that free will to snap in and out of existence. If matter's allowed to do this, why can't we do shit like this? I don't get it.
Right. So like matter behaves indeterministically, but that doesn't mean that the matter has free will. Like, for example, you say if consciousness causes the collapse, but again, I would go back to the question of when does the conscious collapse and when does it not collapse? When does it decide, okay, this time I'm taking more moral responsibility, this time I'm not? I would say we can point to a prior cause that decides that, but you don't have any explanation for why the consciousness does that.
I don't think you can conclusively point to a prior cause. You can't say 100% for sure what's going on in that person's mind. I don't think so. You're claiming that, but I don't think that's true.
Well, the experiments that we've done seem to verify that things are caused by prior events. Like, I'm sure, have you heard of the Debate experiments?
Which one is that now?
That's the one where like people press a button and they can figure out whether you were going to press it like 5 seconds before.
Yeah, and it's not. Guess what? It's not 100% accurate, and the data is a lot more murky than you think it is. Science is not clear on this issue at all, at all. I mean, if we had an answer, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. It would be like us arguing about whether or not the Earth is flat.
Well, I think the difference there is people aren't taught in their schools that we don't have free will, but people are taught in the schools that the Earth is flat. The Earth is round.
It is not a scientific fact that we don't have free will. I want to go ahead and make that clear to anyone who's confused about this. That's not a scientific fact. That is something that is still being very much disputed.
Yeah, it's still being disputed, but the evidence that we have from things like the Debate experiments, like if you have an experiment that had different results, then you can tell me that and I'll look it up later. But when we have these kind of things, they suggest that the decisions we make are caused by things that we don't understand, but that we don't control either. And if we don't control them, then we can't have free will in our decisions. Well, then
how come we can't predict with 100% accuracy?
Randomness. That's why the randomness of the quantum level.
Okay,
but
so
again, randomness doesn't mean free will.
Are quantum computers, right? Something like that, and they're changing shit up, and we're not able to predict the outcome like that.
Well, yeah, the brain is made of fundamental particles, which are quantum particles, and those behave with some significant level of randomness. So I'd say our brains are a product of both that and prior causes, but randomness does not mean free will.
So you're just assuming that because that randomness that you're describing, you're assuming that there's no chance that there could be any free will like hidden in any of it, right?
Well, I'm not like that's a possibility.
Like, what if it just appears random to you? What if from your perspective you're saying, oh, that's randomness, but what if that's what free will is?
The quantum particles?
Well, what if that's not how it works? What if it doesn't work exactly in that way in the case of humans?
Well, that's what a lot of people have proposed, but I think the Debate experiments do a good job of addressing that. It's like you think the brain makes decisions in a quantum state of like when to decide, but we can predict when people are going to do something in advance.
No, but you can't. And the reasons, and the times that you can't, you say, oh, that's randomness. Or you could say that's free will, and we're wrong.
Well, we can almost always predict when they're going to do that with like very, very good accuracy is what the Lebed
What
experiments
percentage
found.
would you say? What percentage is very good?
I don't